Now, oh god, we're indoors. How is that even possible? No, it's fine. Just keep it rolling. We'll trim it in post. Here we go. Ooh, locking it. Now look, I'll be honest. This video was requested by my supporters on Patreon. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, look in the description down below. And it was originally going to be about finding which game has the most realistic ice physics. And after falling down the rabbit hole of measuring fictional ice for a whole day and wondering how I could ever possibly explain to people what I do for a living, I discovered the shocking truth. The game with the most realistic ice is all of them? But no, I mean, clearly that can't be right. You're telling me that Mario sliding halfway across the level is realistic? No, you fool! You're a fool! And look, I thought the same thing. I was banking on titling this video, "Why Video Game Ice is Always Bad," or something like that. But I searched game after game after game, and every single time I found nothing but completely reasonable and plausible ice. And I mean, quite frankly, that just doesn't seem possible. You're telling me that nobody screwed it up? This and this and this are all right? Then why does it feel so wrong? I know I'm probably the only one who cares about this. I know I'm driving myself insane because video game ice is too realistic. But I'm too deep down the rabbit hole to pull out now. And I'm dragging you down with me. Richard, hit that intro. Oh, what else? Oh! I gotta get some ice or something. Also, before we start, real quick announcement. Don't click off yet. It's charity stuff. This year, I'm once again taking part in the Operation Reindeer charity event organized by my friend, Icy Richard. No, not that Richard. From December 14th to the 22nd, me and a bunch of other YouTubers and streamers are going to be doing a bunch of live streams raising money for Save the Children, an organization that, by their own words, works to keep kids around the world healthy, educated, and safe. They specialize in supporting newborns and young kids in areas affected by war and natural disaster to give them a fighting chance to change the world. And I think we can all get behind that. And I got big plans this year. On Friday, December 19th, exactly 1 week from now, I'll be doing a marathon Nuzlocke of Pokemon White. But I've randomized it in such a way that every single Pokemon has a new regional variant form with new typings, movesets, and abilities. It's basically a Pokemon game that nobody has seen before, and your donations will change the rules of the game in real time. Everything from giving trainers more higher level Pokemon to Thanos snapping half my team out of existence. And it's a Nuzlocke, meaning that anytime a Pokemon dies, it's gone for good. Again, it's next week, Friday, December 19th, starting at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time and going all day long, because I'm not stopping until the game is done. So tune in for some chaos, drama, and to support a good cause. And again, a massive thanks to my friend Icy Richard, again known as that Richard, for setting all this up. Go show him a ton of love as well. It's gonna be a lot of fun, and hopefully I'll see some of you there. All right, now let's talk about some No! Right, so ice can behave very differently depending on the game you're playing, but it generally affects your movement in two distinct ways. It takes longer to speed up and longer to slow down. To see how realistic this is, maybe it's best to start with a simple question. Why is ice slippery? Well, it all has to do with friction, a force that we experience every day. But it's kind of weird when you think about it. Like, if you pick up a glass of water, there's nothing here below it, and yet some magical force is keeping it up? Witchcraft! Well, that's because no surface is perfectly smooth. If you zoom in far enough, every single surface has some imperfections, little peaks and divots that collide with one another as the objects move. Each collision dissipates a little bit of energy from the moving object, causing it to slow down and eventually stop. The rougher the surfaces are, the more collisions will occur, slowing the object down faster and faster. The reason ice is so slippery is because it was once water, which can flow and always lay perfectly flat. When it freezes solid, it gains a hard, crystalline structure that lets it maintain this smoothness, so even relatively rough surfaces will slide across it easily. Now, I promise this is all very important to the video game ice mystery, because now that we know what causes friction, we can start to quantify the slipperiness of ice. And hey, while we're at it, if you happen to be taking a physics class right now, you're welcome, because I'm about to help you ace your next test. The force of friction is equal to the normal force times the coefficient of friction. To see what the heck any of this means, let's take a look at a simple example of a block moving across a flat surface. We know that the force of friction is acting in the opposite direction of motion, which is why the block slows down. But what other forces are acting on this object? Well, obviously, if the cube is on Earth, then the force of gravity must be acting on it. Any force is equal to an object's mass times its acceleration. And here on Earth, the acceleration due to gravity is equal to a constant 9.8 meters per second squared. So we know the force of gravity is trying to push the cube down. But there's actually a third force here. You've probably heard the expression, every action has an equal but opposite reaction. That's one of Newton's laws of motion, and explains why gravity doesn't just push the cube down through the face of the Earth. If gravity is pushing the cube down, then the floor must be pushing the cube back up in response. This is called the normal force. Now, if this plane were tilted, things get a little more complicated and you need to bust out some trigonometry. But if we assume that the surface is completely flat, then our normal force is exactly the same as the force of gravity, just pointed in the opposite direction. Which means that the force of friction on this cube is proportional to its mass times 9.8. And since friction is proportional to the normal force, we can go ahead and plug that right into our formula. Now, the coefficient of friction is essentially a measure of the roughness that we talked about earlier, and you can look up all sorts of tables to find the coefficient of friction between different materials. Tire on asphalt has a coefficient of about 0.72, skin on skin is 0.25, and most importantly for today's video, the sole of a shoe on ice has a coefficient of friction of around 0.05 to 0.1, depending on the type of shoe you're wearing. So, in order for a video game's ice to be considered realistic, its coefficient of friction must lie within this range. But how do we go about finding that? Well, we know that our force of friction is equal to this. And we know that any force is equal to a mass times an acceleration. This m represents the mass, which means these other two must be our acceleration. And acceleration is equal to a change in speed over time. So if you run really fast and then start sliding on some ice and measure the time it took to go from whatever speed you started at to 0, you could calculate your negative acceleration. So if we plug in our acceleration into this formula, then rearrange it to solve for the coefficient, we have a nice and simple way to calculate how realistic any given patch of ice is. All I had to do was find an object of a known height to get a scale for the world, measure the character's initial velocity before the slide, and record the total time it took to reach a complete stop. And then, of course, we need to calculate the acceleration due to gravity in each and every one of these games, since they don't take place here on Earth. And I had to do that for every game that I tested. And every single time, I got a coefficient of friction that was squarely within this very small range. Super Mario Galaxy was close to being too slippery, but with a value of 0.55, it's still within the range for both shoes on ice and ice on ice if you got a power-up. Now, on the opposite end of the spectrum, technically speaking, the regular ice in Minecraft is a bit outside this range, with a value of 0.17, about the equivalent of rubbing nickel on mild steel. I don't know why I thought that would be like a good comparison. A better example might be a rubber-soled hiking boot on ice. And I mean, Steve's a pretty outdoorsy guy. He might have some pretty good boots on. And the other two types of ice were perfectly within the normal range, regardless of the shoe. And while we're on the subject, what about the old Minecraft ice boat trick? Surely sliding for a fifth of a mile on blue ice strains credulity a bit. And you know what? You're right. With a coefficient of 0.03, it would be outside the range for a shoe on ice. But perfectly in the range for a hard wood on ice. Mojang, you dirty dogs with your scientific accuracy, how'd you do it? And while we're talking about vehicles, Mario Kart was obviously going to vary a bit depending on the type of car you had, so I tried my best to get one as realistic as possible, with Toad driving a Mercedes with standard tires. Because Toad is non-negotiable. And guess what? 0.182. Perfectly in range for a tire on an icy road. It doesn't matter the material, it doesn't matter the game, every time these game devs are absolutely nailing it. How? So what's going on here? Does every game studio have an ice physicist on hand, making sure the plumber that eats shrooms to double in size slides realistically? If so, I mean, who's hiring? Do these people just instinctively know how slippery ice should be? Is it just dumb luck? Those aren't rhetorical questions, by the way. I want to know. Game designers, spill your secrets to me. Let me know about the ice physicists. Of the 9 ices that I tested, 12 if you count Minecraft walking versus boats, 11 of them had ice that was at least pretty close to real life ice. The one that failed, by the way, was Pokemon, where you just slide forever until you hit something, giving it a coefficient of friction of 0, which is physically impossible and could allow you to break the laws of thermodynamics and create a perpetual motion machine with infinite energy. So I feel like maybe that one shouldn't count. However, I do think I know why ice in games feels so unrealistic. Because clearly, if I run as fast as I can and slide on a frozen lake, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't slide as far as Mario. I mean, I'm not sure, I haven't tested it yet, but that's because I'm not running as fast as Mario. What I found time and time again is that video game characters run really fast. 2D Mario runs at 15 miles per hour, over twice as fast as your average Joe. Link is even faster than that, and they don't call them blue ice highways for nothing, because Steve in a boat can get himself a ticket at 87.9 miles per hour, or 140 kilometers per hour. And that, folks, is why you drive slow in the winter. Especially if your car is a wooden boat. All of these characters slide further than you'd expect because they're moving faster than you'd expect. Based on our formula, if the friction remains the same, a faster initial speed will require a longer time to decelerate from. Video game worlds also tend to have gravity that is way stronger than Earth's by 3 to 6 times. Basically, the physics of video games are always exaggerated to make them feel snappier and more fun. I don't got time to jog around Hyrule or slowly plummet to my doom. I got places to be. I'm coming down. So if the starting speed is a little too high and the gravity is a little too high, maybe they just sort of accidentally cancel each other out, and you wind up with ice that is technically realistic, even though everything around it is not. Or, I only tested a couple of games, so it is possible that there's more out there where you slide way too much, or God forbid, not enough. But, hey, now that you know how to measure it yourself, you can go see how realistic the ice in your favorite game is, and let me know in the comments down below. I'm curious to see. So, there you have it. I don't know if I've really proven why video game ice is so realistic, but I've at least shown that it is. Now, if you'll excuse me, there's still one last type of ice that I need to test.
Now, call me crazy, but I don't really think the bit I had planned is gonna work.
And of course, a massive thank you to all my supporters on Patreon, including Alex, Alakazam, Big Dog Tie for the win, Captain Kirby, Sidian, Sherry and Mark, Stylish, The Boss Killer 94, Ty Studio, and Moki Ubu.